Hi, my name is MJ, and I watch movies. On this channel, I keep up to date with the latest films that come out in theaters and whatever interesting movie news that happens to come up. And we have a few things to cover this week. The Wolfman remake by Lee Winnell came out, as did One of Them Days, a comedy starring Keke Palmer and SZA. I saw both, but before I review them, I'd like to mention a few updates that have happened these last few days. Firstly, a bit of a sad note to start things with, but legendary filmmaker David Lynch passed away at 78 years old. He's best known for the TV series Twin Peaks, and his films were objectively some of the most influential works that shaped the modern form of the art. Eraserhead, Elephant Man, Blue Velvet, Lost Highway, Mulholland Drive, Inland Empire. I mean, the dude made some great shit. I'll even give props to his 1984 adaptation of Dune in some regards. His stuff was weird a lot of the times, but in the best ways. Strange, otherworldly, and they didn't always give the audience direct answers to what their deeper meanings are. It's always up to the viewer. But as strange as his films could be, they weren't alienating. There was a sincerity to everything he did. His was a style that can and will never be replicated. And people have tried to do that, and they've always failed. It's sad to see him go, but it was good to have him for as long as we did. On a lighter note, the nominations for the BAFTAs were announced, and I've gotta be honest, I haven't seen a good chunk of the films that have been nominated here. Emilia Perez, a Spanish-language musical directed by some French guy, got 12 nominations, more than any other film. It feels like it came out of nowhere and suddenly became one of the biggest critical darlings of all the awards circuits recently, except with its subject matter being about transgender women and being set in Mexico, and the director is a French man. Neither the LGBT community nor the Mexicans are very happy about any of this. Sure, critics and the industry people love it, and far be it from me to judge a film that I haven't seen yet. However, I think I'm gonna take the trans people and Mexicans at their word on this. Something feels incredibly fishy about this whole thing. Some have called it an industry plant, and I can't say I disagree with that feeling. But at least Conclave got 11 nominations. That one only pissed off the Catholics, so it's alright. Typically, I don't care about the BAFTAs very much, but they can be a pretty good indicator of where other awards shows are headed in terms of what gets nominated and or wins. The Oscars are the big end goal anyway, though that's probably my American bias saying that. When the Academy announces their nominations, I'll go a little further in depth about it. Oh, but here's something bleak. It's reported that Warner Brothers is developing new movies for Gremlins and The Goonies. Whether they're sequels or remakes, it's not known at this time. But either way, this is just desperate. There's something to be said about how so many major films recently have been reheated leftovers from the last 40 years, and the fact that we're getting a second Goonies thing especially, that is a bad sign. If it's a legacy sequel, that's stupid. All it's gonna do is hold the original with such reverence that it's gonna forget to be a real movie. We've seen that with so many legacy sequels recently. If it's a remake, that's also stupid. As for Gremlins, it has more potential than Goonies. I mean, it's little freaks running around causing chaos. Put them in any scenario and it could be okay. But I don't have hopes for either. Rather than make something new, Warner Brothers is just strip mining itself for nostalgia, as are most other major studios. But we will deal with that as it comes. We do have some good news, though. Greta Gerwig's Netflix adaptation of The Chronicles of Narnia, set to come out in 2026, is against all odds actually getting a theatrical run in over 1,000 IMAX screens nationwide. I never thought I'd see the day. Holy shit. Normally, what happens is certain filmmakers migrate to Netflix to get their passion projects realized, since the major studios aren't so generous anymore, and then they get upset once they realize audiences won't be seeing it on a big screen. Rian Johnson and Daniel Craig moved their Knives Out films to Netflix, and they're quite vocal about how much they hate it getting dropped directly to streaming. Netflix hates the theater business. They want theaters dead so everybody's paying to watch their shit at home. They only grant the smallest possible theatrical runs for certain things, just so they can pretend to be valid during awards season. I don't know what the hell Greta Gerwig did to change their strategy. Like, I'm sure it was an uphill battle with the fiercest arguments in those boardrooms. She probably had to fight like hell for this, but she fucking did it. She did what nobody else has been able to do. Her Narnia movie will run in IMAX beginning Thanksgiving Day 2026, continuing just for a couple weeks before Netflix dumps it onto their website. I don't really give a shit about Narnia, but I'm not missing that. That's pretty much it for news updates, so let's move on to some trailer talk. A few different trailers dropped this week, mostly for horror films, I'm noticing. The one from Blumhouse looks real dumb. Woman in the Yard. It's where some lady dressed in black shows up in your front yard and says ominous, creepy shit to you. What Jaws did for the ocean, this will do for everyone's front lawn, I'm sure of it. Comes out March 28th, and I'm probably gonna skip it unless the buzz is weirdly positive. From Neon comes the trailer for the adaptation of the Stephen King short story, The Monkey. It's about a toy monkey whose very presence causes Final Destination-style accidents and other bullshit to happen. It looks fucking hilarious. Oh my god. The deadpan delivery of the narration, the ridiculous over-the-top kills, the fact that it's all being driven by a toy monkey. I think I'm gonna love that. It comes out February 21st and should be an excellent horror comedy. But we have another horror comedy coming out earlier on February 7th, Heart Eyes. Well, it looks kinda funny to me anyway. A Valentine's Day themed slasher film with a sense of comedic irony. It's where a masked killer goes around murdering couples on Valentine's Day. We don't get too many horror movies for that holiday, and this one looks pretty alright. The trailer shows off some gnarly kills, and there's even one shot that looks ripped straight from the 2003 Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake. It looks pretty awesome in terms of like the kills, so I'm honestly pretty excited for it. But the one trailer I want to talk about more than the others, Until Dawn. For those who don't know, Until Dawn is a very good horror game on the PS4 from 2015. We got young adults in a horror situation, a masked psycho killer putting people in saw traps, supernatural spooky shit with wendigos, very cinematic, story-driven, pretty much an interactive movie. And it's a situation where the character's choices can change the outcome of the game narratively. Relationships between the characters, who lives, who dies, things like that. Every playthrough could feel like an alternate cut of the same film, and it had a lot of big name actors in it too, like Peter Stormare, Rami Malek, and that one guy from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., I don't know his name. So with Until Dawn practically being a film at its foundation, it makes sense that they'd make an actual film of it, and they did. But not really. As the trailer shows us, and as it's been described in the press release, it's not an adaptation of the game. It's an entirely separate story with completely new characters and new setting. It just happens to be in canon with the game. The movie is a spin-off, basically. Yeah, they're trying to expand the universe. As if Until Dawn was ever supposed to have a sprawling, deep lore beyond its self-contained story. Like, it's nothing new for horror franchises to have a siege of sequels and spin-offs and whatnot, but I'm mostly annoyed at the choice of words. Expanding the universe. Imagine if they talked that way about Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. Like, would that have changed anything? Now, the trailer trailer itself isn't terrible, and the film looks like it could be okay-ish, but for being a separate story, it sure is an almost identical setup. Oh, one of the characters has a missing sister, kinda like the game. There's a psycho wearing an identical mask as the one from the game, and there's fucking Wendigos crawling around. Who the hell committed cannibalism here? That's what I want to find out. But don't worry, they're making sure it's a different experience from the game. They're in an empty lodge in the woods instead of an empty lodge on a mountain this time. You see, it's the change in elevation that makes it super different. But most importantly, there is one aspect revealed in the trailer that actually is a big departure from the video game. Mostly because I think it's the filmmakers misunderstanding the assignment. It turns out it's a Groundhog Day mechanic. Yeah, when the characters die, they start over, getting reset back at 6:45 p.m. the previous night. More accurately, it's like Happy Death Day or Edge of Tomorrow. Whatever you want to compare it to, the characters get reset every time they die. There's new challenges, and they've got to make new choices in order to survive until dawn. Because that's when the bullshit stops? What the fuck are they thinking? This is a total misunderstanding of the game. With most average games, yeah, you die, you reload, and try again. Mario, Zelda, Uncharted, The Last of Us, most games that exist function this way. But with Until Dawn specifically, if one of the characters dies, they're dead. Whatever choice you make, even if it's not life or death, the game locks you into that narrative path. Your choices matter. But how can a character's choices matter anymore if they just get to start over and make different ones? What gave the filmmakers the impression that it's fucking Groundhog Day? If anything, it's the other games I mentioned whose films should be like Groundhog Day. Imagine if in the 2001 Tomb Raider, Angelina Jolie keeps dying while fighting those moving statues or whatever, and she has to keep reloading to find a better strategy to take them out. That would mechanically fit better for a Tomb Raider adaptation than Until Dawn. A better mechanic for an Until Dawn movie is to make it like Clue from 1985. Have several different cuts of the film in circulation, featuring different outcomes, different dialogue in some parts, and different character deaths for sure. Maybe even a version where all the characters live, because in the game, if you're really careful, all the characters can survive. That would be a pretty interesting alternate version of the film. Or have these alternate versions on the Blu-ray, or fucking anything, dude. And what's this about the characters needing to make it until dawn? That's also not how the game works. You're not on a timer, really. This isn't Five Nights at Freddy's where the gimmick is you have to make it to dawn. It's just, in the original game, dawn is the soonest that the characters can get rescued by helicopter from where they are. Yeah, no, it doesn't seem like the people behind this actually thought it through very well. I don't want to pass judgment on a film that's not even out yet, but my hopes, they're not very high. The game was just too good for them to touch, but they'll use its title on an unrelated thing, throw Peter Stormare's character into the mix, sprinkle in some iconography from the game, even if it doesn't make sense, give it a Groundhog Day mechanic that doesn't fit within the game's themes whatsoever, have it be directed by the guy who did Shazam 2, and yeah, there it is. If this wasn't tied into Until Dawn, I wouldn't be bitching so much. And I'm sure it'll be a serviceable horror film, but because it is a spin-off, it's driving me up the fucking wall. Anywho, I'm done bitching about that kind of shit for now. Let's get on to some actual movie reviews. So, 2 major films opened this weekend on January 17th, which just so happened to be my birthday. I'm now 27 years old, and typically having a January birthday and being a film lover really sucks because more often than not, January is just a terrible month for film. It's usually the dumping ground for all the mediocre bullshit that Hollywood just doesn't know what to do with. But was this year different? Did I have a good birthday movie weekend for once? Well, actually, yeah, I kinda did. Let's start with one of them days. It's a comedy, a normal comedy. In this day and age, it couldn't be. Yeah, it's only recently dawned on me how few of these kinds of movies we get anymore. We get a shitload of action comedies, sci-fi comedies, blockbuster comedies, horror comedies. So many films of different genres are just funny nowadays. Not that they have comic relief, they are just funny. They could be classified as comedies, partly. But just a straight up normal comedy about normal people in a normal world? Not so often anymore. At least not ones that get very highly promoted, or ones that don't go straight to one of the streaming platforms. You bet your ass I went and saw this. It stars Keke Palmer and SZA. They play best friends with barely a dime to spend between them. Palmer is a waitress who aspires to become a manager, and SZA is a free-spirited artist with a stupid boyfriend who takes their rent money and wastes it on dumb shit. Now the girls have 8 hours to somehow get $1,500 to save themselves from eviction, and it's really putting their friendship to the test. The day descends into pure chaos. One thing after another, one failed attempt after the next. Some insane side characters making everything worse. And you know what? It's actually a decent film. More than decent, I would say it's kinda good. Far from the funniest comedy I've seen. Like, it's not a consistent laugh out loud funny, but I was having a good time from beginning to end regardless. Not every joke hits as hard as I might have wanted them to, though I wouldn't say a single one failed necessarily. Even then, I think it's just a well-written movie in general, beyond being funny, and the leading ladies are really good together. Keke Palmer and SZA make for an excellent duo, and I liked their characters quite a bit. I liked following them on this twisting and winding quest and all the wild shit they got themselves into. I liked their friendship, their banter, how they contrasted with each other, and the actresses made it feel so genuine. I know Palmer's a great actress in just about everything she does, but it's SZA's acting debut, and she was a natural. For her first time ever, just solid comedic timing and delivery, and all around a good performance. I actually want to see more of her in movies in the future. She's primarily a singer, though I haven't heard any of her music. Obviously, I haven't heard anyone's music. I assume it's fine, but I'll definitely keep an eye on her acting career. Maybe it's this cinematic landscape being so starved of ground-level comedies like this, it makes one of them days stand out so much. Like a shining beacon of joy. Maybe if this came out in the mid-2000s, it might not feel as special compared to the other comedies of the time. Hell, maybe it isn't special. Maybe it is just okay. But right now, it's more than okay. I didn't bust a gut laughing, but I can't say it wasn't enjoyable. I guess for this weekend, if a horror movie like Wolfman isn't your thing, maybe you'd have a better time at one of them days. It has some good laughs and characters that you'll have fun spending time with. More than anything, I'm just glad something like this is playing in theaters. So easily could have been dumped on Amazon or something. Maybe with a decent crowd that's really into it, you might laugh a little harder than I did. Who knows? Speaking of Wolfman, that's the other movie for the weekend. Directed by Leigh Whannell, it's a remake of Universal's 1941 Wolfman movie, which had another remake previously in 2010. I should say the 2025 version is more of a complete reimagining, because it has fuck all to do with the original. The plot, setting, and characters are entirely different. The only consistent thing is that a dude turns into a wolfman. Christopher Abbott plays our main character. He's a guy with daddy issues, having a rough patch with his wife, and trying not to be a jerk to his own daughter the way his dad was to him. Daddy issues and generational trauma are the primary themes here. He is dedicated to protecting his family no matter what. Abbott gets news that his father passed away, so he takes his wife and kid out to his childhood home in Oregon to gather his belongings and whatnot. But it's the middle of nowhere, no power grid, no cell phone signals, and that becomes a problem when a wolfman starts terrorizing them. But as was shown in the trailer, Christopher Abbott got infected by the wolfman and is slowly transforming into the very monster he's trying to protect his family from. Lee Winnell previously did the Invisible Man remake from 2020, which is probably my favorite movie from that year, so I was pretty hyped to see his modern take on the Wolfman, until I saw a very unflattering reveal for the Wolfman's design that was shown at Universal's Halloween Horror Nights a few months back. I spoke about it in my last video, but yeah, this was a lame way to reveal the look of the monster. Lee Winnell had no say in it, apparently, and he was pissed off at the studio, and rightly so. But either way, that is just a terrible design for a werewolf. There's nothing wolf-like about it. It's just an old balding guy with bad nails. I was hoping it wouldn't represent the real final design for the Wolfman, and thank the fucking Lord it doesn't. There's nothing even remotely resembling that costume in the final film. It's a design that somebody at Universal just pulled out their ass. So for anyone who was maybe turned off by this dumb costume for a theme park, I can assure you it is not what the Wolfman actually looks like. The real final look is pretty awesome. Also, the movie is just really fucking good. It's a well-written film, but not for its dialogue, if this makes sense. The dialogue is a tad stilted and awkward more often than not, and by no fault of the actors, it's just weirdly worded lines that anyone would have a hard time selling. But the scenario itself is incredibly well executed. The slow, agonizing transformation from human to beast, watching this man lose himself, desperately clinging on to what humanity he has left, and we, as the audience, aren't sure how much of him is still left in the monster, and his family virtually is unable to do anything about it but survive. It's incredible, and it's awesome how the themes are worked into the story. And on top of that, the filmmaking is more than good enough to make you forgive some weird lines. I love how it played with the sound and lighting as Christopher Abbott's senses evolved. It's hard to describe, and I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty details right now, but it's a very creative way to show how different he is becoming from his non-infected family. It's kind of like what happens with Peter Parker whenever he gets bitten by the spider. It's kind of sensory overload, but this time he's not a superhero. This time it's a fucking downer. Lee Winnell's Wolfman is probably the best werewolf movie we've had in years. I mean, what's the competition? Like, the one just called Werewolves from 2024, starring Frank Grillo? Granted, that's more fun than Wolfman. That one had a punk rock werewolf with a mohawk, piercings, and studded vest. Meanwhile, Wolfman is, like I said, it's kind of a fucking bummer and is legit scary as hell. And it's just better. Yeah, no, it's the superior werewolf story in every single way. It did not disappoint. In comparison to Lee Winnell's Invisible Man remake, I am hard-pressed to say Wolfman is truly a redefining new take on the story. Invisible Man also didn't resemble the original 1930s film, or the book it was based on, but it took the concept to the next level, for real. Truly, that was the definitive new take on the Invisible Man for the modern day. Whereas Wolfman is pretty much exactly what I expected it would be. A great film, no doubt about it, but it's not groundbreaking. And maybe it doesn't need to be. And I don't think audiences will really be worried about that because while it's not pushing boundaries or taking the concept to new heights, it's doing what it's doing very fucking well. And that about does it for this weekend. There was a Netflix movie that came out as well, which brought Cameron Diaz out of retirement. I probably should have covered that, but whatever. Maybe I will briefly mention it in the next video, if I get around to it. But as for now, I think I'll just leave things as they are. Next weekend, opening on January 24th, we have a couple interesting movies coming out. Flight Risk, featuring male pattern baldness Mark Wahlberg, and directed by Mel Gibson, though the trailers desperately don't want you to know that because he's a very controversial figure, and for a good reason. And Steven Soderbergh has a supernatural horror film called Presence, and it's entirely from the perspective of the ghost haunting the house. And that sounds pretty cool, so expect reviews of both those movies, plus my takes on whatever interesting or aggravating film news happens to come up. Thank you so much for listening, it means a lot, and I will see you next weekend.